Thank you, dear friends, for your beautiful practice tonight and your presence, which supports each of us in here and also those we don't see here in this room right now, as well as all beings everywhere throughout space and time. Well, last Sunday, I shared about the 12 spiritual practices that we are encouraged to practice during this 21-day spiritual practice period, but actually it applies for any time and always. But sometimes it's helpful to do a specific time period to help us solidify our practice energy. I also mentioned our solidarity with the Sikh community. But one thing I forgot to share with you was that even though I was invited to speak at their candlelight vigil, because there were so many speakers, and some shared a little longer than they were supposed to, they decided to just cut it off. So I didn't get a chance to say anything there. There were 800 people there in solidarity with the community, and that was beautiful, and that was enough just to be present. So as I meditated on, I really was using my deepest intuition to determine whether or not to fly back from the Northwest one day early from my vacation. And I really felt like I saw the signs that seemed to nudge me toward that direction. One sign was that this place I was going to stay at, my one last evening, was at a Russian Orthodox monastery on Vashon Island, and the wonderful abbot called me and said something came up at the monastery and they had to leave and go somewhere else, and so there wouldn't be anyone there. So I can't really stay there by myself. So he was sorry and hoped I could come next time. And then there was another sign as well. A couple of other things happened that just kind of indicated to me, it's time to go back, and it's fine to go back a day early so that I can be personally present at the candlelight vigil and share some words of solidarity. So I thought the universe wanted me to do that, so I went, and then I didn't get to say anything. So I meditated on that, and I was thinking, I saw all the signs that kind of nudged me toward coming back a day early, and yet I didn't get the chance to share anything. So was this a waste of my time to come back a day early? But I don't think it was a waste of time, because I knew I felt these signs and I was following my intuition. So I meditated, what else besides that happened because I came back a day early? Because I was so focused on one expectation result that I was completely ignoring everything else. We do that so many times. We so focus on our conscious intention on expectation on something, and that we forget that there may be other things going on too, beyond our ego's awareness. Maybe the universe is actually doing something different than what our small human mind is conceiving at the moment. So as I meditated on, what else happened because I came back a day early? And I realized there were two things. One very, very important. The other not as important to me. But the not so important one was that the water pipe broke in my family's house, and if I hadn't come back a day early, it would have flooded the entire house. So it was good we caught it one day early, because it just started trickling. And but that was not so important to me. Maybe it's more important to my family, but I'm glad that we got it fixed. But anyway, the more important thing to me was I realized that because I came back a day early, I sat beside completely different people on the airplane. And the person I sat beside on this plane ride was this man who's 48 years old, going through a divorce. His wife left him for another man. He's going through midlife crisis also, and he's really dissatisfied with his whole life that he's had up to that point, and he was really hungry for something spiritual, something different, to make sense and meaning of the rest of his life before he dies. And he was also very heartbroken and grieving. So I got an opportunity to speak with him, and he was so excited to to talk with me and to learn more about meditation and mindfulness, and he wanted to get different websites and book recommendations. He was just so ready to hear the Dharma. Not only that, there was also a psychotherapist sitting next to us, so he was surrounded by a Buddhist minister and a psychotherapist. He wasn't going to get away. The universe had it all planned out. So, and the last words I spoke with him before we left the plane was, just remember, the universe is looking out for you, even though you may be suffering right now. The fact that you had these two people who would be around you to share with you means a lot. So don't take these little signs from the universe for granted. Not only he, but all of us are being taken care of. And it may not always look like we're being taken care of at every single moment in time, but the bigger picture, if we can see the bigger picture, we are being taken care of. From time to time there are little critters that crawl around the room. Recently I saw a few geckos. We've had crickets, we've had cockroaches, we've had other little insects. But I made a vow that we would protect the lives of any creatures in this building. So, we would, and sometimes we'd try to grab the bug mindfully and carefully, And the thing is, it's just frantic, thinking, oh my gosh, a monster. I'm going to be killed. I don't know, it's I don't know what it's thinking, but but it's frightened. It seems it's frightened, and but that's its perception. But in reality, what's happening is someone who's compassionate is trying to save its life and put it someplace else so that it won't be, stomped on accidentally in this building, to put it outside, where hopefully we'll be safer. So, when you think about it, sometimes things happen and we don't understand why they happen. All kinds of crazy things happen in our lives. And from our perspective, it may seem like the universe is out to get us. I've had such bad karma that, I must have done something really bad or whatever. We blame ourselves and we go into this negative thinking. But in reality, perhaps, it's just the universe trying to help us grow, to help us to learn the lessons we came to learn. And not all our lessons are about bliss and joy and pleasure. Many of our lessons are about patience, getting through our anger and our sadness, learning how to be compassionate by going through suffering ourselves. We have many, many lessons, and our most important lessons are wisdom and compassion, which are the ingredients of a Buddha, of an enlightened being. And you don't get wisdom and compassion if you're always just in bliss and only living in pleasure. It's like a pearl. When a little sand irritant comes into the oyster, it immediately responds with creating this substance that eventually over time creates a pearl, which is a very precious thing in nature. So the pearl of wisdom and compassion, the pearl of our Buddhahood, it doesn't come from pleasure only or bliss only. It comes from a combination of joy and happiness, as well as becoming strengthened through trials and difficulties, and mindfully maneuvering our way through life and learning how to respond in more skillful ways. But we can't develop that pearl of wisdom, compassion, and also skillfulness without going through life as it is, with all of its ups and downs and all of its joys and sorrows and all of its certainties and uncertainties. So now I'll come to the teaching part of the evening. So, mindfulness, concentration, and insight. So it's these three qualities, these three substances that create the pearl, are not linear. They are inter-influential on each other. So, mindfulness leads to concentration. Concentration leads to more mindfulness. Concentration leads to insight. Insight can lead to more concentration. Insight can lead to more mindfulness. Mindfulness can lead to more insight, etc. So they're all interrelated and supportive of each other. Now, what's the difference between mindfulness, concentration, and insight? Well, mindfulness is simply awareness. And concentration is focus. And they actually help each other. One way to illustrate mindfulness is that mindfulness is being fully, deeply present and aware, like space. Very spacious. It's a very spacious quality. And so the awareness, let's just say here's your center awareness, and you're just equally allowing your awareness to just accept everything, just to be aware of everything, without judging or without favoring. So mindfulness has a quality of equanimity and non-judgment and full acceptance. So if you're practicing and suddenly you hear someone cough and then you start reacting to the cough like, I don't like that cough, that's no longer pure mindfulness, okay? Because it's no longer just accepting it equally with the silence, right? And so now, obviously, it's hard for us to develop that such an intensive kind of mindfulness at first. So you have a small mindfulness that at least can be present, just aware. I'm aware that I'm really not liking that cough, or I'm aware that I'm really having an itch, or whatever. And you may not have, it may be slightly judging, but that's okay. We have to start somewhere. But eventually, your mindfulness will be so strong that it's just completely non-judgmental, accepting awareness. Just being present with everything that arises in our consciousness and through our sense doors. Whatever we smell, whatever we see, whatever we touch, whatever we feel, whatever we taste. It's just present, and we're just with it, just open to it, not like labeling it, judging it, reacting to it, or craving it. It's like it's neither craving or aversion. It's just being with. And this is a really important quality to cultivate in our practice, because we're so uncentered in our life, because we're constantly being pushed and pulled by our reactivities, right? So mindfulness helps us just to just stop, be present, let go, and let be, and just accept and be. And this is a very important quality to cultivate. Now, concentration is also a very wonderful energy, but to illustrate it, it's more like that you're bringing all your awareness and your attention onto one focus only, rather than having complete spacious awareness. Now you're just taking your awareness deeply into one focus point. Maybe it's just this step as you're stepping, just this breath as you're breathing, just the sound of this mantra as you're chanting. Or if you're doing deep listening meditation with someone, just listening to that person, not thinking about what you're going to say or how you're going to respond, just listen. So that's a concentration energy. Okay? Now, and when concentration is fully developed, it can help you to have a powerful experience of complete oneness. And that oneness can lead to a very, very powerful state of bliss, which, we call this samadhi. If you have very, very powerful, full concentration. Now, the Buddha taught that concentration is a good thing to cultivate, but it is not. It is not the supreme goal of the path to experience just bliss. Even though samadhi can lead to states of bliss, but that's not really the goal. That's not the point of our practice. It's a good thing to develop concentration because we need that concentrative energy, but the reason why we need that concentrative energy is not so that we are always blissed out all the time, but that we use that concentration energy to break through into wisdom, insight, understanding. And that understanding is what actually will help us let go of the things that we cause ourselves, which are like suffering and other people suffering. We can start letting go of that and start transforming it, because now we understand what's really going on, and we can now go about doing something constructive. Whereas before, we didn't quite understand what was actually happening. And so it was difficult for us to actually know what to do to change things. So mindfulness, by developing that spacious awareness, it just makes it easier for you to then take that equanimity and focus it into concentration. But also, by having concentration energy, it can allow you to then have that equanimous mindfulness, because you see, by having concentration energy, you're able to really fully be deeply present and stable. And then as you're doing your mindfulness practice, it's coming from that stable center. Whereas if you didn't have that stable center, your mindfulness kind of wavers. So whoa, it's kind of wobbly mindfulness. It's like, yeah, I'm aware of everything, but I do have a slight, I'm like, whoa, I'm kind of I'm pulled by that. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's interesting. We're kind of pulled off from center. But if we have strong concentration, we can keep the mindfulness steady, even, and equanimous. So, the Buddha taught, was one of the first spiritual teachers in history to teach the dual use of both concentration and mindfulness together to break through into insight, into wisdom and understanding. This is called prajna. This is not just any kind of understanding or insight. It's the deepest kinds of insight and understanding into the nature of reality, into the nature of ourself or non-self, into the nature of suffering, into the nature of impermanence, into the nature of nirvana, into the nature of everything and everyone. And so these kinds of insights, as we begin to open up to them through the practice of the combined practice of mindfulness and concentration, will help us then to eventually fully awaken to full enlightenment. Now, how do you practice mindfulness and concentration? Well, mindfulness and concentration do not have to be only cultivated in formal sitting meditation. But the formal practice of sitting and walking meditation and other meditation practices is almost indispensable for the cultivation of the practice toward deepest insight. So even though it's not the only way to cultivate mindfulness and concentration, I think we do ourselves a disservice if we ignore the practice of formal sitting and walking meditation and other meditation practices, because those are just so very, very helpful. And they're so available, and there's so many teachers now than before in history. I mean, we have so much more at our disposal now than ever in history. in human history. This is a most unique time in history where there are so many people who have access to the practices and teachings. Now, whether they access it or not is another question, but they have the availability before them. Every time they log on to the computer and access Google, it's available to them if they only knew that it was available to them. But it's available. We have everything available to us necessary. So don't deprive yourself. And of course I know I'm just preaching to the choir right now, but maybe when you share with friends who don't practice meditation yet, maybe eventually you might share that it's a resource that is so invaluable. Why ignore this resource? But it's not just in the formal times that we cultivate mindfulness and concentration. In fact, the Buddha offered many practices to help all kinds of people to practice the mindfulness and concentration in various settings. In fact, he recommended that you practice these before you try to do any of the deeper kinds of meditation practices to help prepare you. Of course, we don't have time for that in this 21st century. I think we need to do both. We need to do the preparatory and the deeper stuff at the same time, because we're just so inundated by things from the world that we need to counteract as much as possible so we can do it simultaneously. So I'm not one of those people that say, first spend a few years studying the Buddhist teachings and practice generosity and loving kindness before you meditate. After you've done 10 years of service, then you can meditate, maybe. But see, I don't believe in that. I think that meditation can help anyone at any stage of life. Maybe just you might have to adjust the kind of meditation you do depending on what stage you're at in the practice. So maybe not everyone can do half lotus posture sitting for 25 minutes, but maybe you can do walking. Maybe you can do sitting on a chair for 5 minutes. So you just adjust it for yourself wherever you're at. But mindfulness is since it just is simply awareness. We can bring that awareness right now, in this moment, in every moment. Just bring awareness. One of my teachers, one of her practices at the beginning of her practice was she chose one or two items in her daily experience to be her bell of mindfulness. So bell of mindfulness, a bell of mindfulness is a reminder to stop and breathe and be present and to relax and enjoy this breath, this moment, here and now. But it doesn't have to be just a literal bell of mindfulness. You can have other bells of mindfulness. Anyway, my one teacher, she chose doorknobs to be her bell of mindfulness. So every time she touched a doorknob to turn the door, open the door, that was a reminder for her to just be completely present and aware and open the door with great loving kindness and mindfulness. So every doorknob she would encounter throughout the day would be her bell of mindfulness to remind her this, in that moment, let's bring our full awareness and full concentration and our full presence here and now. So if we can do that in the little moments of the day, it makes it easier to grow those moments, to make them longer, so that the moments of mindfulness are more spacious and they occur more frequently and closer together, until someday we create a string of pearls of mindfulness that are constant. And on that day, you are called a full-time Buddha. Right now, we're sort of half-time, part-time Buddhas. We're only fully mindful once in a while throughout the day, and that's fine. That's just where we're at. But that's very helpful to just bring our full attention and awareness in the here, in the now, start off with certain moments, then start growing those moments, right? So pick something simple. Maybe every time you put your palms together and bow, let that be a bell of mindfulness for yourself and for the other. Every time you stop at a red light, let that be a moment of practice. So that's just some simple ways of cultivating mindfulness. And you can let your mindfulness just permeate your whole daily life. You're walking, you're driving, you're eating and you're drinking, you're hugging, and the way you wake up and the way you go to sleep and the way you schedule your day and the priorities that you set and the way that you communicate with others. It's all opportunities for practice of the mindfulness. So I'd like to ask Michael if he has a 2 or 3 minute sharing of anything that he learned from his experience at Plum Village this summer that helped him with his practice of mindfulness, or just whatever you want to share for 2 or 3 minutes if you like.
Sure. Thank you. When I think about establishing mindfulness, I think about having tea with one of the brothers at Plum Village, and it was myself and another American and a guy from Holland, and we sat with this brother to have tea. And this was a special kind of tea that the night before you put the green tea in the lotus flower that's coming up from the pond, and the lotus flower closes at night, and with the dew, the fragrance gets into the tea, and this particular flower he had put a rubber band around and left for 2 or 3 days. So it was very strong. But Thich Nhat Hanh speaks about the 16 ways of breathing, and you can find these Dharma talks on the internet. But we can apply these 16 ways of breathing to any activity. And, well, in brief, as we were having tea, the monk mentioned this. When we have tea, there's 3 points of contact. There's the breath, and the body, and the tea. So we become aware. Breathing in, I'm aware of my in-breath. Breathing out, I'm aware of my out-breath. Breathing in, I'm aware that there's a body here. And then breathing in, I'm tasting the tea. And the monk shared that we don't have to question the taste of the tea, or, ooh, what kind of tea is this? We just enjoy the tea. He said, remember, when we drink tea, we know we're drinking tea. And so this is what comes to mind on establishing these.